the sun is just like impossible to imagine how gigantic he is. Just like this gigantic gaseous orb in space that is far enough away from us that the much, much, much smaller moon who's orbiting the Earth is the appears to be the same size as him based on how far she is from us as well. And I think that random, if you can use that word anymore talking about astrology, but that kind of random natural occurrence that the appearance of the sun and moon in the sky is the same, exactly the same, to me is where kind of that clash of sun and moon physically meets metaphysics. Because why? Why are they the same size? It's completely random, it seems like.
I think you asked me a question once, actually. It had something to do with, I think, in a certain group, there were more people who were born under a certain, there was a disproportionate amount of people who were born under certain moon phases, and a disproportionately small group of people born under certain moon phases. I think, was it quarter moons or was it that?
Yes, it was quarter moons in that particular poll. It was the quarter moons that were like really absurdly low. And it might have just been the dynamics of what that group was, however, people born under that sign, what time of day that they're awake and online. It could be like any plethora of like weird, nuanced reasons for that. But yes, that was kind of funny that it was just striking how disproportionate it was at the
Got you.
time.
Yeah, I was born under, I believe, a waxing crescent because my sun is in Leo and my moon is in Libra. So it would have been approaching Scorpio at the time, which would have been last quarter, I think, because it would have been approaching Aquarius, which would have been a full moon, being opposite the sun, right? Because
Yes,
it's sun conjunct moon, that's a new moon, and sun opposite moon, that's a full moon, right?
that's correct.
So
Uh-huh.
it could quite possibly be that a lot of people uh, who have sun square moon, because the moon being so representative of our subconscious, they may have a hard time tapping into and recognizing the behind the scenes magic, if you will, because I feel like the sun is more of a concrete entity because it is that which our entire galaxy is based around. And the moon has this abstract nature to it because it's so transient. It's almost ethereal because it's the single fastest moving body that we observe in astrology on a common basis. It's here today, gone tomorrow, so to speak. Not only just in its signs, but in its phases as well. So, I told you many months ago that I'd get back to you on that, and it had crossed my mind for quite some time, but I just never brought it up with you. So, uh, that's my answer for that.
No, I love that explanation. Like it seems very plausible that that tension that's created between the two luminaries in that case would kind of push a person born with that tension away from kind of the metaphysics of an astrological space. I think that that's good.
Yeah, I think Sun square Moon. Honestly, besides Mars square Saturn in a person's chart, I would imagine, in my personal opinion, to be Sun square Moon to be like the most challenging other aspect. Really, any squares to the Moon, but especially Sun square Moon. I have Moon square, I believe, natal Uranus and Neptune. And in my personal case, the thing that makes them, the thing that makes that most difficult to handle, I would say, so I have Moon in Libra, but these other two placements, Uranus and Neptune, in Capricorn. The thing about Capricorn versus Libra, Libra wants everything to be fair. Capricorn doesn't care. Like Capricorn's like, is it by the rules? Did you fill out the proper forms? And Libra's like, I shouldn't have to fill out the forms. It's not fair.
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah. So, uh,
Yes.
tell
I
us more about
identify
the. Hmm?
identify with that just because I also have that Neptune Uranus kind of conjunction in Capricorn. Um, and to me, actually, that Neptune placement is um, reminiscent of my desire to have my spirituality come down to the physical realm and like find expression through science. That's kind of um, how I relate to that Neptune placement. I actually have him square Mars. Um, and with that, I relate to my athleticism. I'm actually also an aerial acrobat by profession. So I think that Mars Neptune expression uh, is, yes, most well expressed in my performance.
Well, that is fantastic because when I get both feet off the ground, I basically forget where I am. Like, I've wanted to do like backflips and whatnot. I've kind of experienced my own personal challenges with those things, but I'm working every day towards a more agile existence. Most of my existence has been just brute strength related, but with in my personal case, I have Sun and Mercury tightly. I'm talking about like with minutes of each other squaring the North Node in Scorpio. So that's really kind of led me down a very dynamic path. I'll tell you that much.
Mhm.
And speaking of the nodes, would you like to talk about? If I recall properly, it's about the fact that as the sun moves in relativity through the actual universe, as the planets follow it through that relative space, the sort of trajectory, I think is called the elliptical?
It's the ecliptic.
Ecliptic. Okay, now the elliptical is what you get on when you're trying to exercise.
um, yes, but there's a elliptical is also how you describe orbits because the orbits of all the planets are not perfect circles. So elliptical is still it's still related to astrology. But yes, what you're talking about, the apparent motion of the sun through the sky, we call the ecliptic. And yes, the relation that the nodes have is that all of the planets in our solar system, because they're all orbiting the sun in the same plane. Basically, the solar system is just like a two-dimensional line. So all of the planets basically cross our sky on the sun's ecliptic, right? But then since the Earth lies on the ecliptic, and we're referencing our perspective from the Earth. But since the moon is actually orbiting us rather than orbiting the sun, and our rotation is tipped in relation to the ecliptic, her ecliptic is like this. So the circle is just slightly off from the circle that the sun makes. And I like to think of it as like a Venn diagram where those two circles kind of um, intersect at two opposite points, right? And so it's where the sun and moon's ecliptics intersect that we have the north and south nodes.
I wish I could do an animation of that, but I'm telling you, Sun Square Jupiter. I'm not doing anything else for a while. It's gonna be quite the minute before I do something else. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's actually fairly interesting though. When we talk about the lunar nodes, we generally like they are the nodes that are almost exclusively used in astrology, and that's pretty relevant because like I said, the moon is such a fast moving body. Even though the lunar nodes only move what about once every 1.5 years, they go through a sign. So they go through a sign approximately at the same uh is it the same amount of time as Chiron, thereabouts, somewhere in that
Yeah,
range.
you're right.
Yeah, even though they stay in certain signs longer than others. and that varies from the north node to Chiron, from the lunar nodes to asteroid Chiron. So the nodes speak to our karmic duty in this lifetime, as they've said. But what if there was something? What if there was a collective karma that is far greater than just the social? Because the thing about the lunar nodes is that they are very social in nature due to how slow they move. Saturn takes about, excuse me, sorry about that. Saturn takes about uh, every 2.5 years to get through a sign, give or take. Jupiter takes a year to go through signs. So what a lot of people don't know is that all physical heavenly bodies have lunar nodes, not just the moon. And so in my recent, you know, cursory research regarding the nodes, all of the lunar node, not the lunar nodes, all of the planetary nodes from basically Mars onward, it's either Jupiter onward or Mars onward. The south node for all of these planets is in Capricorn right now. And if you'll notice, for quite some time, we've been experiencing a very slow, almost invisible, but quite gradual zeitgeist of understanding that the structures that we have been worked into as a society are not sustainable. And Capricorn speaks to those structures, to that sort of. Some people are going to disagree with what I have to say, but I've never been known to shy away from controversial topics. But I feel like if you just have a look at it, we're just in a we're just in a feudalism of a freer range now than we used to be. Like, sure, in name, we don't answer to, Lord Baron Dunderchuff of Hyperspace 4 or whatever, like, they don't own us per se. But the way that the system is set up and who can get away with what, who's allowed to do what, who can experience the luxuries and the grandeur of life is still abundantly clear, even though people will tell you things like, oh, be grateful now because back in the day they just would have thrown you in a workhouse and giving you, 3 meals of porridge a day and you would have been cracking rocks for the rest of your life. And I'm like, yeah, it's almost as if we're realizing that that's not how things ought to be done.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit radical for some people, but yeah, all of those social and generational planets right now have their planetary south node in Capricorn, moving
Mm.
towards Cancer,
That's
and
super.
yeah, and from what I've seen, from what I have seen, they are going. The vast majority of them are going to be. How shall I say? See, if you compare right now, if you compare right now to say 2050, I don't have an actual calculator for where the nodes are going to be from now until then, but I
Yeah.
can definitely tell you that the South Node in Capricorn is one such that has been around on a collective level for quite some time. I would go so far as to wager that it's been around since perhaps the Industrial Revolution or the Enlightenment of the Renaissance.
Yeah, just to guess based on historical trajectory, basically. I mean,
Absolutely.
I'm almost positive that you're correct at least about Pluto. Like I'm sure that Pluto's south node has been in Capricorn for centuries at this point.
Yeah, so for
Um,
Pluto to be meeting in Capricorn right now is truly indicative of the times.
Totally. For sure. Um, no, I think that you're right that it's interesting that we take a lot of consideration into the lunar nodes. And I think that it makes sense because, like you said, she is the fastest object. So it's easier for just like a person almost without any knowledge of astrology, to just go out and look at the moon each night and like see as she passes amongst the other planets that she moves either below them or above them at most points because she has that her own separate ecliptic. And they call that like up and down relation of the planets, declination, right?
I
Is
believe
that
Pluto has a similar sort of thing going on.
yes? Because he also has a completely different trajectory of all the other planets. So you are correct in that. Um, so I think that it makes sense for us to be more observant of the nodes of the moon. It's just easier to track them, where it's like our human perception, especially just like our eye perception, it's really difficult to see where those generational planets cross the ecliptic. It's just easier to it, especially because when the sun meets one of those planets, they're combust, which literally means that they're like invisible. So you like can't even compare them to the sun's ecliptic when he's near them to like get that sense. Like you need all this other technology to realize that those nodes exist where the lunar nodes are apparent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can basically, you could, if you literally just look in the sky with ye old tools, just a telescope and a section and a little chart drawing, you can actually see those things happening. Is that what you're getting
Totally.
at?
Yes, exactly. So like even like the ancient astrologers were using the nodes because they could calculate them, where you couldn't calculate the nodes of Saturn, like probably unless you were like a super genius and really really observant. I just think that it like needs technology, and of course not um, the generational planets, since you couldn't see them in the past. But I think what you said about kind of the south node of the moon representing our past, our buildup of the past in whatever sense that you want to take that in, and then the north node kind of being the potential of the future. To me, that's like the easiest way to think about them. Also, just like the south node being the past, the north node being the future, and the moon itself being the present moment, like the only actual real thing, the present. I think if we take that and move on to those generational planets and think about how the past up to this point has a overwhelming abundance of Capricorn energy, I think that makes some really exciting insights for sure that I haven't really thought about that much before.
Oh yeah, that's what I was telling you about before the live began. I was like that. I'm gonna deliver it subtly, but it's gonna tear the roof right off the thing. Like there's a whole world of astrology out there that we haven't yet quite truly got into. And for me, I'm at that stage in my astrological learning where what I want to learn is less so of, oh, go read a book and this astrologer said when this happens, but learn just how did they, what systems and what mental paradigms that they have established to glean that these sort of events, these planetary events in the sky, how they corresponded to events on Earth.
Totally.
And I'll
No, I think
say, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I think that's really interesting too. Just like how much historical observance that you need to layer on with those cycles in order to start to generate true kind of scientific um, relationships between those like cause and effects.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
I hope that one day we'll be able to very categorically bridge the gap. But at the same time, I'm kind of appreciating the value of people who are willing to straddle the razor thin line between blind faith and absolute apostasy. because somewhere in the razor thin void between those two things, you have a person who can be sufficiently curious enough to pursue with some degree of methodical nature about themselves, an understanding of astrology without being fully beholden to, oh, it just works because it works. And that's a rare line to follow, and there's quite a lot of people in astrology who are following that, so that's much appreciated. So when we talk about the lunar nodes, they also correspond to our past lives and what we are moving toward in this lifetime. And I'll tell you, as someone who has nodal squares and Saturn retrograde in my chart, those are two prime indicators for me that this isn't my first rodeo. That this is a retry life, so to speak. And the thing about having to retry those things is that when you reach that halfway mark of the square, it's just like fives in the tarot. You're neither here nor there, but wherever you are is a place that you cannot remain. It's a place. It's a rest stop. It's a temporary place that you have to be in to understand more about where it is that you're actually going towards. Like Leo is a very, in my case, South Node Taurus, North Node Scorpio. Taurus is an energy that is more. Taurus is more concerned about, I would say, its physical possessions, and Taurus, much like Scorpio, isn't really necessarily gaudy about them in the sense that it doesn't have any interest in sharing or exchanging them. But Leo, on the other hand, is an energy that, while it is interested in physical things, it is also more extroverted with it. It's more flexy with it. It's more showy with it. Whereas Taurus regards things, Scorpio regards experiences. And so, yeah. But the thing about the both of them is that Leo, who values both, is learning from Taurus and Scorpio to be a little bit more quiet about it, be a little bit more reserved about it, be a little bit more understanding that. Oh, excuse me. Hold on, I just broke on camera. But
Oh,
yeah,
Lord.
yeah. Not everybody is going to. Not everybody is gonna want to see what you're doing, and not everything that you are doing needs to be seen until it happens. That's one of the toughest lessons that I've had to learn under my nodal squares. But again, I'm very grateful personally that my nodal squares are to my sun and Mercury, because that's very manageable. Squares to placements like if the moon is squaring her own nodes, that represents a huge level of inner conflict there. Like with me, it's just I had to understand that who I'm meant to be in this lifetime, like what my identity, my role is in this lifetime, is very different from what I initially thought it to be. And once I was able to adapt into that and to surrender to that kind of divinity, that's when things started to be a little different for me. Do
Totally.
you have any aspects to your nodes in your chart?
Um, I the biggest things for me are conjunctions. I have the South Node conjunct my Sun, which is where eclipses take place, right? So if you think about that kind of intersection of the two ecliptics, it's when the Sun comes into conjunction with the Moon's ecliptic. When he crosses her ecliptic, that's when the eclipses happen, because the Moon crosses the Sun's ecliptic twice every month. You know, since she's going around fast, she when she comes in contact with the nodes, it doesn't necessarily cause an eclipse unless the Sun is also there, right? But so knowing that my moon, my Sun was approaching the South Node, and my Moon was approaching the Sun, so it was just about 17 hours after my birth in Phoenix that um, that solar eclipse happened. Um, and in my personal case, Lilith was also nearby. So Black Moon Lilith is has to do with the proximity of the moon, how far she happens to be or how close she happens to be. And the Black Moon Lilith placement in the chart shows where that furthest part of the moon's orbit lies. So in the case that she was at that furthest point in the chart and then passing over the sun, it actually creates a annular eclipse, which is Latin for little ring. And so while she was fully over him, the sun was just a slight amount bigger, creating a little ring of fire around her, right? So actually in my my username, you can see it's Brandon's Annulus, and that's what I am thinking about, that little ring around the moon right after I was born during that eclipse, which again I kind of relate to my desire to pull the physical science and the metaphysical spirituality together. I don't know. I like to wrap all that into my brain.
Oh, I understand. I was going to ask you, how do you feel? How do you feel about having so much energy conjunct your south node, and what have you done to move forward from that south node and fulfill a north node? Because I know that when a node, whether north or south, is so close in proximity to just about anything in a person's chart, that it creates a sort of difficulty on occasions because there's just so much energy that is being absorbed. And so how would you say that you're working out with that? And also, I'm just gonna tell you right now, Mercury has been retrograding so hard on this live. You have no earthly idea. Like I'll tell you more after you let me in on how that's working out for you.
Yeah, I just muted myself because the ice cream truck just passed by. And yes, so that's just perfect that you brought up Mercury retrograde right now. I love the ice cream. And speaking of which, I share your nodal placements, right? So I also have the South Node in Taurus, North Node in Scorpio. And I relate very, very hard to my Taurus placements. I feel, so it's Sun, Moon, South Node, Lilith, and then I've just like a bunch of stupid asteroids, but that Taurus energy of being very, very consistent, to me, like, the nature of Taurus being fixed Earth is what helps me to conceptualize it the best. Just like the most solid quality and the most solid element. I do feel a lot of consistency in terms of like how I move through life. I actually think that I'm in terms of like actual physical movement, I'm actually a very slow person. Like I tend to do everything with a very long time scale, and it gives me a lot of anxiety to have to do things quickly. Even as that, like my style of movement happens to be very slow, and that also relates, I think, to my Libra rising. It's just very Venusian, and I think that there is something about slowness that is inherently necessary to experiencing beauty.
Yeah,
right?
Venus
It's like
is an appreciator of the finer things.
it's like the adage, like, to stop and smell the roses. I feel that very presently, well, just like consistently in my life, and it's interesting in taking that into account, how my North Node probably like has come out most in things where I have had to act and quickly. and it's hard for me to necessarily like have things come to mind in how I've progressed towards that, because I feel so like the gravity of my south node is just so intense. The actual placement that's connected to my north node is Pluto also. I think the same as with you, right? It's
Oh,
Pluto controls that north node.
I just realized I had like the not. I will respond to that in just a moment. I've had the badge for one of the groups that I read in. I've had that up for. Oh my goodness! I'm just gonna laugh through all this. That's just
Just
what I'm
laugh.
gonna do. It is what it is.
It's
But
fine.
yeah, I hear you. So that's very interesting because I feel like on a personal level that okay, and now the phone is like hold on a second. I gotta figure out who I wanna say some words to. Okay, it's just them saying, "Hey, the weather exists." I'm like, yeah, it does, don't it?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, like good to know. Just make loud noise right in the ears of everybody, just to let me know that the weather is happening. But yeah, though I feel like in my case, my experience with any sort of disagreement with the lunar nodes has been more, I guess, mental than physical. Like it doesn't really directly relate into, in my case, whether or not I've been slow or not. If anything, life would suggest that it's more like sometimes you're too fast, sometimes you're too slow. But from what I'm hearing from you, uh, one of the things we talked about before we got on the live is your Gemini Mercury, and how that very well seated, well dignified, and adaptable Mercury is sort of the gateway to carrying all that Taurian energy forward. So I can appreciate what it is that you are experiencing there. And yeah, Venus very much is like that when it comes to beauty. It's like a bottle of wine, for example. Them vintages, them things 50, 60 years old, that takes time. Beauty is something that isn't the inherent value of beauty is its rarity and the effort put into it very often. So I can definitely understand how if a person with as many Taurus placements as you is made to go through the world at a very unpleasant pace, how I can feel like the world is being robbed of beauty.
Actually, what you have talked through now has kind of unlocked um, the experience in my mind a little bit, because what I've realized is that the point in my life that probably most relates at this point was when I was almost exactly 18 and a half.
The nodal return.
Exactly on my nodal return was basically when I met my aerial coach, when I met the woman who taught me how to engage in my profession. And at the time, I was going to school for musical theater at Brigham Young University. So at the Mormon University, right? And actually, also what happened right at that time was I kissed a boy for the first time right in that same 2 week period. So, so all of a sudden, right on my nodal return, I finally kind of come to terms with my sexuality, my North Node in Pluto. I also in like kind of come into awareness of what I want to do with my professional career. And those two things coming together simultaneously caused me to decide to leave the church, not go on a mission. The thing I had been planning to do, like my whole life since I was a child. That's what all good Mormon boys are supposed to do, is go on a 2 year mission when they're 19. I decided to not do that, to leave the church, to leave BYU, and to like to give up what that stable core that I had developed my whole life. Like Like, and I think that you're right that Gemini Mercury is kind of what helped facilitate that change from 100% in the church all of a sudden to 0, and kind of the flip flop that engaged in that nodal return without as much of a hiccup as it otherwise could have. I know that's just all like piecing together in my brain right now. So I appreciate you helping that.
Oh, well, I'm glad that I could certainly help with that. I recall, do I even recall being 18? That was a minute ago. That was like don't let the face fool you. That shit was an eternity ago. Pardon my language. Like that's just how abject it is to me. Like what? Hold on a second. We gotta go all the way back to like 2012 for a moment. Or yeah, I think I think that around my nodal return, it made me understand that life comes at you fast. And one of the things that really Scorpio doesn't get enough initial credit for, but does get enough credit for once people are really truly met with scorpionic energy, is its ability to come at you fast. Because you know when you're dealing with a bull or a bovine of any sort, generally the way a bovine is going to come at you is very predictable. You're going to see it from quite a distance away. They're going to gather up speed, and if it hits you, it's going to be like a freight train in low gear. It's hitting you. It's going to be nigh up on impossible to stop, but it's very predictable, and you can get out of the way of it in time as long as you're paying attention. But a scorpion, just the opposite. Small little thing, big stinger. You don't know where it's going to come at you from or how it's going to come at you. That was and I'm being very euphemistic. I'm not conveying very accurately just how scary of a time age 18 and a half was for me, because my life was changing in so many different ways. I had to learn and accept that. So being Leo, you know, I was used to being the king. I was used to not having to put in particularly large amounts of effort or change my ways in order to uh, achieve whatever needed to be achieved. But then when I came to university, I actually graduated high school at 16, came to university at 17. But right around that time, a year and a half later, a lot of detours started to happen because I was so used to doing things in a very predictable sort of way, and life was like, "Hey, you need to learn to be more like Batman and plan ahead and have you a I don't have a plan going on." So while our experiences are a little bit different in that regard, I can definitely assure you that as far as identity, sexual identity comes a little bit later in the picture, that I definitely had to come to terms with understanding, hey, I am the way I am, and it is what it is.
Totally. Um, as just a slight aside, it's very funny because I was actually stung by a scorpion when I was a year and a half old. It was actually the most venomous scorpion in North America. Like I said, I grew up in Phoenix, so it was a bark scorpion, which yes, the most toxic venom in North America. Um, it just was in our little apartment and stung me on the finger, um, and it was very traumatic for my whole family. Not as traumatic for me because I was a baby. I can't remember,
Not a formative memory.
but it's funny because that occurred well, so a year and a half later in terms of a progression. So in a progress chart, what happens is you move time forward in the natal chart 1 day per year. So you could call one you call like your birthday a solar return, right? Because the sun has returned to the same spot as when you were born. And you can also say the same thing about a day, right? Is when the sun comes back to the same spot in the sky the next day, it's kind of its own solar return. So in a progression, you equate those two things together. And for me, a day and a half later, after I was born, the moon had crossed the sun, crossed my south node, and then had come into full opposition with my Pluto in Scorpio at the exact same moment that scorpion stung me, which I think is just like too on the nose astrology.
I can't help but wonder if someone in who had Pluto and Libra in a similar event got hit upside the head with a bunch of scales.
uh,
Like just imagine somebody has Pluto and Libra and they go through similar things that you went through, and a bottle fell off a shelf and conked them in the head or something. I don't know. Or somebody said some words about them, because that's what Libra would do. Grapevine it.
Or they just get hit with a lawsuit.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to think. Did I speak? Because I took last week off from the podcast. I'm thinking 2 weeks ago. I'm wondering if I actually spoke about the significance of Pluto. I think that I spoke more about the significance of Pluto in my private groups than I did on the podcast. But I think that if people are interested in that type of material, I'd be happy to bring it to them, because Pluto certainly has a lot of significance. And I think that Pluto's relation to the moon is the eccentricity of its is it ecliptic or elliptical in this context? Like how it's all doing the slanted rotation around the sun. Which
yeah. I'm pretty sure that we would say he has his own ecliptic. But again, all of the orbits are elliptical, and his orbit is also extremely elliptical.
Okay. So he has a unique ecliptic, and that is a value that he shares with the moon.
Exactly, so, you're right.
That's something that I'll probably bring up on next week's podcast. But before we go, I would like to ask you, so for let's say that a budding astrologer comes to us and they're interested in lunar astrology, what tips would you give to them?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to do a little shameless self-promotion and recommend that you follow the page About That Moon Life on Facebook, which is a page that I assist in running. We also have a private group called About That Moon Life also, and that group is by admission only. Admission happens during the phase of the moon from new to first quarter. So there's only like a week period each month where we let in new members. But I think that the moon is a really, really accessible way to start getting into astrology in a way that is both useful and also really powerful, because she is so visible, especially in her later phases. She's so quick to go around the Earth, so she comes into contact with all of the other planets during 1 month. She makes her way through every sign in 1 month. She makes her way through each of the houses in your natal chart in 1 month. So it's a really just taking to the account the moon is a really efficient way to learn about all those different energies and how they affect your life just really quickly, since she's so quick. So the beautiful thing is that we have the technology to, I apologize for the car. We have the technology to track her with a bunch of different applications. You can use your phone to help you, to just see where the moon is. Please,
excuse me.
You're fine. But the other thing is that, like, just go out and look at her. It's really really a beautiful experience to know when the moon is rising, kind of to start to intuitively know when she's rising over the horizon, and to just take the time to walk outside and look. Because always when she's rising, she has like a little bit more size. She appears a little bigger. She's got that beautiful kind of orange tint there, with the atmosphere being a little thicker there near the horizon. And then, just periodically, a few hours later, she's always on the horizon, or she's on the midhaven, directly above you. A few hours later, descending. Like, to me, the most beautiful thing about following the moon has been gaining a better relationship with her, with my eyes. I just love the aspect of looking at her. And as far as you want to take it past that, in terms of interpreting how it's affecting your day-to-day moods, how it's triggering other points in your chart, you can take that literally so far, just like to endless places, or you can simply appreciate where she is in the moment, and that is also good enough.
Oh yeah, and if I can add on to that, two things. If you're just now getting into moon-based astrology, of note, October began on the 1st with a full moon in Aries. It will end October 31st with a full moon in Taurus, which corresponds to a blue moon, hence once in a blue moon. So we are going to experience an abundance of lunar energy this month. It is a great time to work with lunar energy, but please, if you are going to work with lunar energy, respect it, use it carefully. Don't just go and use it on a whim. Make sure that you understand what you're doing before you do it.
This is actually a great place to end because my laptop is dying. I was just kind of trying to run to not let her die, but it's okay. I think we're coming to a close. I just wanted to mention that the next full moon, the blue moon on Halloween, is directly on my natal placement at 10 Taurus.
Got you. Well, that's gonna be exciting for you. I think he died.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, no, there you
are. I really appreciate. Yeah.
Hopefully next time we have you on the live, Mercury in retrograde won't be such a big deal. I think that for the remainder of the pre-shadow all the way to the post-shadow, I'm going to temporarily suspend the podcast. I'm just going to move it to a different method just because I'll tell you about it later, but go ahead and get if you want to get your laptop charged, we can go ahead and end it here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. See you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Sabian. And I appreciate the audience as well for listening to us ramble, but I thought it was interesting.
Oh yeah, very interesting. And we're off.